Welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast, where powerful women are interviewed every week to share real inspiring stories and incredible insight to help women or anyone break the barriers, be a part of innovation, shatter the glass ceiling, and dominate to the top of their sport, industry, or life's mission. Join us as we celebrate exceptional women and step into our power. And now, here's your host, Angela Gennari.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. My name is Angela Gennari, and today I am here with Andrea Johnson. Hello, Andrea.
Hey, Angela, I'm glad to be here.
Oh, good. I'm so happy to have you. So, Andrea Johnson empowers executives and founders to lead with authenticity, conviction, and confidence so that they can make a positive impact on their lives, organizations, and communities. Uncovering and understanding the significance of her core values became the key to the process that allows her clients to become impactful leaders. Her passion is equipping female leaders to define a new culture by trusting their own ability to think critically, create imaginatively, and lead effectively. And Andrea Johnson is the CEO and founder of The Intentional Optimist, and I love that company name so much.
Thank you.
So,
it's quite an introduction.
Yeah.
It always surprises me.
Yes. So I'm so excited to dive into this. So what got you wanting to coach executives?
I spent over 25 years in higher education and in administration. So in three different types of institutions. The last two were schools of medicine. So I am used to working with very high-powered people.
Yes.
And I did administrative work, operations work, research administration, where I understood and had to pass exams for all the NIH guidelines for clinical trials and grant funding and all that stuff. But I got very used to, and I almost have a master's degree in theology. So I'm used to the higher thinkers. I'm used to the people who are really kind of higher powered, ready to go do something. And that is the kind of person that when I sit down at the table, even if it's just for dinner, those are the kind of people I'm like, oh, let's have a conversation. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
I love to dive in.
That's what got me interested in that kind of level. Now I work with anybody who's willing to grow, right? And they may be a pre-executive, they may be some, maybe that they're on their way. I work with a lot of millennials who are just ready to go and they're not quite there yet. But I can see the potential and they're gonna go. So that's kind of where I come from.
Oh, that's awesome. So I actually just started working with an executive coach and it has been game changing for me.
Good.
And I will tell you that I discounted executive coaches as somebody, as a CEO. I'm like, I don't have the time. I don't have the time. I don't have the time. And it was always for me like, I don't have the time for a coach. How am I going to fit that into my schedule? But now that I have a coach, I am so much more effective with my time. And I think that was the game changer for me. And so, I'm a huge fan now. And when people ask me how they can improve their business, I'm going to say, get yourself a good coach. It keeps you accountable.
Oh my gosh, yes. I used to have a small group program that was called Intentional Accountability. And we just met once a month and kind of set our goals and then kind of walked through, like actually we met twice a month. We set our goals and then a couple weeks later we came back and we kind of shared with the group how we were doing that. So you can find accountability in other places, but that is a really good takeaway.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that there's just so much value that coaches bring. And it's just that one person who doesn't have a stake in the game. You don't have a reason to steer them one way or another. You're always looking out for the best interests of the executive and the company. And I think just having someone on your side who's not, getting a paycheck from the organization and has, a certain agenda it's a great asset.
Yeah, we don't have a stake in the game. We have the ability to push back. We have the, half the time in a particular program that I've got going on right now, after the first meeting, literally people leave and they almost feel a little discouraged. And I'm like, don't be discouraged. Well, because I've pushed back on some things. They're trying to discover some things, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but they're trying to discover some things about themselves. And I ask questions. Yeah. And I push back and I'm like, tell me more about this. Why is that a thing? And that separation from the process and from the game means that I can do that, right? It means that I can do that with they trust me to do that. They know that's what I'm going to do. And then when they come back for the next meeting and they're like, I figured it out,
Oh, that's
and then we can
amazing.
move on. And then that gives them the courage to know that they can figure out the next piece. So
Hmm.
coaches get a lot of, we get a lot out of it too. So
Yeah,
it's not just you guys.
for sure. That's awesome. So you talk in your bio about core values becoming the key to the process that, helps people become impactful leaders. So what are core values and how do they align with what you're trying to do?
Well, we talk a lot in the business world, Angela, about core values, and it's a really hot topic. Businesses are figuring out their
Hmm.
values. I came from two amazing schools of medicine and larger institutions on the East Coast that have fabulous values that they work towards. And so a lot of times what we'll do is we'll say, I'm just going to make my own values. And so we think
Mm,
that we're going to figure them out or put them together or decide on them. And
right.
what I want to tell people is that core values are not something that we decide on that are outside of us. These are the principles and the priorities that guide each individual's actions. They
Hmm.
represent your foundational convictions. They allow you to navigate all of life's twists and turns, ups
Hmm.
and downs, waves crashing over you, while keeping your identity and your authority in the forefront. So
Hmm.
these are your own guiding principles. So whenever I do workshops in this too, right? And
Hmm.
I started out by saying, I'm just going to tell you up front, if you tell me that faith, family, and country are your core values, we're gonna have we're gonna have a deeper conversation. I'm going to
Right.
push back because all of those things are kind of outside of you. Faith might be arguable, but
Right. Right.
they're outside of you. And so your core values are the things that you're born with. They're your non-negotiables.
Mm.
Every single decision, argument, pushback, reaction, greatest joy,
Mm.
deepest sorrow, every single thing that you've experienced, especially in interaction with another human being or
Hmm.
situation, has touched on one of your core values.
Mm. Yeah, that's
They're
interesting.
just, it's literally like kind of if you could open up like the non-physical part of you and look in and see the Venn diagram or whatever of like these beautiful jewels that kind of make up your core, that's what
Hmm.
they are. And so being able to identify those, man, that gives you, imagine, and I watch people do this, the authority to just be yourself,
Yeah, yeah. So
right?
what are good examples of core values and what are core values that you find that align differently with different types of people? Like for example, for a CEO, is a core value going to be different than somebody who is a school teacher? And, does that kind of dictate how your career goes, or do you find that there's their career has less to do with core values and more to do with like legacy and how they, what they've wanted to do and kind of skill set.
Well, for starters, I would say that your core values, you can be a CEO or a school teacher and have the exact same core values.
Right,
They are going
right.
to play out differently. So,
Mm-hmm.
how we integrate them into our lives, into our leadership and our relationships, that's our work. But the
Mm-hmm.
other piece of that is there's a difference between principles and things that we value. Like that's
Okay.
where family or sometimes religion or even, patriotism, those kind of things are going to show up as things that we hold as high principles for ourselves. But my core values are going to show up differently in my family than yours will. And
Mm-hmm.
you and I both might say, I value my family. It's
Mm-hmm.
my values and how I work my business, but I'm going to show up differently. So,
Right.
core values are things that we can't necessarily see, things
Hmm.
that are documentable when you touch them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, I have several clients who respect as their top core value,
Yeah.
right? And that one sounds, it is intangible, but we see actions that demonstrate respect.
Right.
Freedom is another big one. I thought that was
Mm-hmm.
my top core value for for a long time until I realized doing more work and becoming more and more aware of myself. It's actually autonomy of thought.
Oh, interesting.
Literally, do not tell me what to think.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And you know where that showed up? That showed
Mm-hmm.
up in the 2-year-old that my mother could not control.
Uh-huh.
Right.
That's
I mean,
great.
we don't
Mm-hmm.
think about how these things really are integral to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I have another client who said her top core value was dependability.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And
I
it's just
like
like
that.
she's dependable and it's like, it doesn't
Mm.
matter. But the other thing about core values is that they're reciprocal.
Yeah.
They don't just go one direction.
Right.
If I only want you to respect me, I'm really just a narcissist, right?
Right. Exactly.
So, but if respect is really a core value, then I care just as much about whether you're respected or not as I care about whether I'm respected or not. And so it might show up and play out in social justice, or it might play out in employee relations, right? So depending on, and those are very different ways that that one core value can show up. So let's see, they're invisible, they are reciprocal, but they also are the thing that either brings you your greatest joy or your biggest anger. So I tell people, if you're stumped when you start, look back over the last week or two or month. What angered you the most? What really ticked you off? I mean, like fried green tomatoes, lady hits the car, kind of like, I'm not doing this anymore. And it's amazing how when we look at that, we can see it and say, okay, that really angered me. What would be the value underneath there? What is the thing? And then flip it over to the positive opposite.
Yeah.
And if you can look at the things that bring you joy, then that's how. But back to your question about careers. When I left, so the last institution I was at was the University of Virginia. Great institution.
Yeah.
And but as a autonomy thinker, right? It's like they kind of need you to do their thing, right?
Right.
And so I realized it's like, it can't be in a big institution. But they invited me back last fall to do a kickoff workshop for training research administrators. And they really liked this idea of helping them understand their core values. And then they said, could you help them teach them how to align their core values with our core values? And I'm like, I can tell them how to look at whether or not your core values will allow them to show up in a way that will honor theirs and how theirs can be honored. But if I tell them to align theirs with yours, I'm asking them to take on yours.
Right.
Right? So when we look at how we apply core values in career, a lot of times we just need to ask ourselves, if I am in this situation or in this institution, can my core values be honored? Can my autonomy of thought be honored? Can my second one is authenticity. Can I truly be myself? Can I, and that's a big one for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it will probably get more defined as I go, as I age, and as I look at it some more, but it really is a big deal. So can I be truly authentic? It was a conflict for me when I would hire people as an administrative assistant in a school of medicine and say, this is a launch pad job for you. It is not a landing pad. I expect you to grow, and I'm going to help you grow bigger in this organization. And then 2 years later, when they leave, the chair of the department's like, why are they leaving? What did you do? I did my job. And he's like, no, you didn't. I mean, so I want somebody who's going to stay a long time. So my authentic playing out of my authenticity in my leadership couldn't be honored there, right? But that didn't mean that there was anything wrong with that organization or institution. It just wasn't right for me.
Right.
But my third one is belonging.
Oh, I like that one.
Yeah. And so I realized, I mean, I grew up overseas, and so it wasn't any real lack of security, but my personality is such that I felt a lack of security leaving the United States, going to Korea, traveling a lot, my dad being gone a lot. It was a volatile time in Korea's history back in the 70s and 80s. And I needed to feel like I belonged. And we had this amazing expatriate community, a bunch of missionaries and business people. And so I belonged in that. Well, then when I came back to the United States, I'm a third culture kid, right? It's like, I don't fit in Texas, Houston, Texas. I was weird. And so I tried finding a sorority, and I tried doing all these other things. And my need for belonging was never really met. It was for a really long time. And I went through bulimia and depression and all kinds of things because I didn't know how to handle that. It was just dishonored. It wasn't anybody's fault. I just didn't know how to do it. Now I realize, oh, my belonging is played out in the fact that I've just told my family, this is how I am.
Yeah.
And my sister's like, we love you no matter what. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. And my husband and my son, that's how belonging plays out. But in a relationship, I want you to feel like you belong.
Right.
Just as much as I belong. So it creates this openness, which then, oddly enough, Angela, attracts people. I mean, it just, so when you do that and you are more yourself, that's how you find a better career path. And so instead of saying, I'm going to do it based on legacy, it's like, if that's what you're doing it for and that's important to you, you can figure out how to honor your core values, even on that kind of path.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. If you come from a family of attorneys or a family of police officers and you want to go down that path because it's a legacy that your family has created, you can still figure out how to do it and still be
Absolutely.
authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, I love that because I feel like my core values, when I look at my life, for me, integrity. Integrity is the
Mm.
one thing that I get angry when somebody doesn't have integrity. Or tells me that they're going to do something and they don't do it. Like that is the one thing that, it's like if I've done something, if I've scheduled something, like this podcast, when I was joining, I was like, I'm so sorry, I'm a mess. I took a red eye, I'm exhausted. But it was on my calendar and it's going to happen. And so like I am, true to my commitments. And so when other people are not, that's one thing that really goes through me. So I can't
I
deal
love
with it.
that. And if
Yeah.
if we were in a coaching situation, I'd be like, all right, tell me more about this integrity. How would you
Right.
define it? And you
Sure.
kind of did. You
Yeah.
said, I do what I say I'm going to do.
Absolutely. Every time. Every
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
So
So, and I think it's so important for me and, why I struggle with other people sometimes because if they burn my trust one time, I really have a hard time
mm,
with that because I feel
yeah.
like they don't have integrity. Like the entire core value is gone. They don't have it. And so
Well, and part of the way we grow and
hmm
is being able to understand that our core values are really for us, right? And
hmm
so as somebody exits my course or my coaching program, it's like, now
Yeah.
don't go out there and beat people over the head with your core
Yeah.
values because it's not how it works. But it
Right.
does when you learn to integrate them, then we step into my business name, which is intentional optimism. And
Yeah.
we start integrating them through using the 6 tenets of intentional optimism that include things like courage and presence
Yeah.
and optimism and energy and wisdom and
Mm.
intentionality, because not everybody has that core value. And so
hmm
you get to decide how to interact with that and how to take care of it if it means that you need to have a conversation with a staff member,
You're
or
right.
I don't work with that client anymore. Right. It's
Right.
like you get to decide how you're going to use all of that information as you move forward.
Yeah, I love that. And so earlier we were talking about different personality tests, and I have a psychology degree and I've taken all
Okay.
kinds of tests, and so I can appreciate the value of them because it has helped me to discover my more authentic self.
Hmm.
These personality tests that, it's on paper, right? And so things that I've denied or things that like that doesn't feel right, like it helped me to put together the pieces of why I make the decisions that I make and how that plays out in my life. And so they've actually opened up Pandora's box for me to just kind of
Oh, I
understand
hear
a
you.
little bit more about authenticity. And
Hmm.
it allows me to be more accepting of it.
Mm.
And I try less to be somebody I'm not, right?
Good.
And so I think that's what a lot of these personality tests have really done for me.
Hmm.
So how do you use that in your line of work?
Well, I personally am certified in DISC, which is
Mm-hmm.
a behavioral analysis and communication style assessment. And I'm with the Maxwell team. So it is
Mm-hmm.
all leadership and communication based. You can do a DISC assessment online, I think for free, but you
Yeah.
can do a whole bunch of different companies have partnered with People Keys, and they all present it from a different angle. Mine personally is from the one that I use with Maxwell is personally from communication and leadership standpoint.
Hmm.
So it's looking at everything from how you recognize the patterns in your communication, to
Mm-hmm.
how you then speak to other people using their language, if you will.
Right.
But it also has this amazing, I don't know, it's like it's different. It's proprietary to Maxwell and it's called the Power Disc, but it's 7 areas of leadership that the assessment actually helps you determine how developed you are in those areas. And
Oh,
so it
interesting.
shows you, yeah, it shows you where you are on detailing. It shows you where you are on
Mm.
on relating or processing. And the goal is not to then just only work on the things that you're not developed
Right.
in. The
Right.
goal is to, especially at a CEO level or an executive level, is, oh,
Mm-hmm.
this is a great opportunity. I've already gotten here on my strengths. Then I want to turn around and mitigate or augment in the
Mm-hmm.
areas that I don't have strengths in.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I work with people, and use this tool, I usually start, especially in a business relationship, I start with DISC
Yeah.
because it is on paper, because it is a
Yes.
report. It is something tangible. It's something that you take an assessment and then it spits back something for you. And then we walk through it.
Hmm.
Then we layer in core values and intentional optimism because a lot of people need to start with a tactical piece. And
Yeah.
so I use it for that. But I just, on my own podcast, just finished 10 episodes of 5 huge tools that I've used throughout. I mean, I started Myers-Briggs when I was 15, right? So,
Wow.
I mean, it was the first time
Good.
I took one. I've done the
Yeah.
California. And so there are 5 main tools that I just shared that, and DISC is one of them. And they're
Hmm.
all for different reasons and they measure something differently. So if a client wants to, dive into Clifton Strengths, we'll look at that, but I am not certified in it. So I
Yeah.
use them as a tool to help you learn how to communicate better.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And I'm not sure. I could be getting just confused with another one, but there's a book by Dr. Kathleen Edelman called You Said This, I Heard That. And it is it's a personality assessment, but it's more of a oh gosh, why am I blanking on this word? Um it is an assessment on how you communicate. So
Mhm.
that's what makes me think it's similar to DISC, and it uses the red, blue, green,
Okay.
yellow.
Yeah.
And so red is like your that leadership, that
Hmm.
go-getter, that, and so, but it's all introvert. So red is extroverted, process oriented. And
Yes, you
then
are describing DISC.
okay,
Yes.
perfect. So
Yes.
she just must have interpreted it in her own
Yeah.
way. So
Yeah.
yes, so I am an extroverted, process-oriented person.
Oh, so
And
you're a D.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Hmm.
the way that that comes across though is I can be harsh to other people, or
Yeah.
it comes across as harsh
Hmm.
because I'm very direct and
Yep.
I'm going to go right to what I have to say instead of the hey, how are you? How's the family? How's the I'm just gonna say, hey, did you get that done? Like, I just want to know. Like that's I don't really know. I don't, the other stuff is not a concern. I need to know what I need to know
Sure.
first. And so that can come across as harsh. And so I've learned how to temper that a little bit,
Yeah.
just understanding it. But but I think one of the challenges that I have had personally is that I register very, very low on the empathy and green
Hmm.
scale. So I don't have much of that. Like on the Clifton Strengths, out
Yep.
of 34 traits, number 34 is empathy. and,
Okay.
and I think of the red, blue, green, and yellow, I had a total of 0 green.
Okay.
So it's a little concerning, but at the same time, like I've learned that while that doesn't come natural to me, I can force that into a conversation and make other people feel more comfortable. So like
Can I give you a little encouragement?
sure, sure.
Right. You're using words like I force myself
Yeah.
and I'm harsh. And if you haven't picked up on it, I'm the yellow. I'm a I,
Uh-huh,
right?
uh-huh.
If nobody had picked up on that yet. But
Sure.
also, just in case your listeners don't know what DISC is,
Uh-huh.
it is just very quickly, it's on an XY axis. So it's 4 quadrants.
Hmm.
And the Y axis is what you talked about is the extroversion versus you could all call it
Introversion.
introversion or reserved, extroverted or
Hmm.
outgoing or reserved. The X axis is people oriented versus task or process oriented.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so the D is in that top left quadrant, and we call that the driver or the dominant.
Yep.
And that is literally an extroverted, process or task oriented person.
Right.
But we look at it as even though you think you registered 0 on the green, you're just registering in what we might call negative on the green spectrum. Okay.
Okay.
And so for those listening, the D is the left quadrant, the top right quadrant is the I, which is the
Hmm.
inspirational or the influencer. These are
Hmm.
storytellers, these are sense of humor. They're about 11% of the population.
Hmm.
D's are only about 3% of the population,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is great. We don't need a
Yeah, we
whole
don't need
bus
a whole
full of
bunch of those.
drivers.
That's
No.
terrible.
No, that would be terrible. It'd be too many drivers in the bus. But then going around the bottom right-hand quadrant, these are your people-oriented and reserved people. These are your greens, these are
Mm.
your S's or your
Hmm.
steadies. And
Hmm.
they're about 69% of the population.
Wow, really?
I know.
Wow.
So then the bottom left quadrant is your blue or your creatives, compliance, and or the
Hmm.
C's. And these are only about 13%, but these are your detail people.
Yeah,
These are the ones who,
accountants.
if you've got somebody who is like questioning you every single time and wants to know all the details of a project, this is a
Hmm.
C.
Yeah.
And for a D, y'all are both on the process or task side, but
Mm-hmm.
you're like result oriented, get it
Yes.
done. I don't care
Right.
how you do it. And the C is
Yeah.
like, but what if I do it wrong? Right.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So learning, everybody has a different pattern. But another piece to tell you is that when I'm an ICD, right? I mean, I actually
Hmm.
have 3 above the midline.
Wow.
My S is so low. Right? So I literally tell people I am the definition of a non-team player. And
That's funny.
and so, but here's the deal. We can embrace who we are and
Mm-hmm.
learn how to communicate with other people's patterns. So all you
Okay.
have to do is keep in mind, you don't have to force in how you doing and how's your family, but
Right.
just remember what's important to the S is those
Mm-hmm.
kinds of things. It's
Right.
making sure that we don't change just for change sake, Miss D, right? I
Right.
mean, that's what a D does, right? It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what if we did it this way? And they just
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but a C is not questioning you because they think you don't know. They're questioning because they want to do it right for you, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot
Mm-hmm.
of times we switch it around and see the I is the life of the party and wants to tell
Yeah.
the stories, even though it may be hard, even as a podcast host, to get her to shut up,
Yeah.
right? So,
No, no.
but the nice thing is when I work with Ds, with a really like a very heavy D, I will actually help them gamify or
Mm.
result orient, a process orient dealing and communicating with the different types, right? So
Yeah.
if you identify someone on your staff that is an I,
Mm-hmm.
figure out how to gamify making the communication with them fun for them,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
you can just like walk by and say, "Hey, how was the race this weekend?"
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
"Hey,
Yeah.
did your team win?" And
Yeah.
then the I's like, "Yeah." And it's like, "How
Yeah.
did your kid do in softball?" And they'll tell you, and then you walk on. You have laid the groundwork for fabulous communication with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
For an S, it is making sure that they have what they need, that they're secure and that they're safe,
Mm.
and just taking the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe make it a game for yourself. How many questions can I ask in 10 minutes or 5
Oh,
minutes?
yeah. Yeah.
Because then it takes away, because when we talk to ourselves, it
Mm.
matters, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that you came off a red eye. I know that you're tired, but I just
Mm.
can't help but be a coach, right? So
No,
it's
it's
like,
great. It's great.
don't force yourself because they
Mm-hmm.
feel it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Whenever
I
we
know.
force it, everybody feels it.
Well, and I have to remind myself, like if I'm putting an email together, I'll have to I'll shoot off a text and it'll be the first text of the day. And like they've texted me and said, "Good morning, blah, blah, blah. Hope you had a good weekend. Blah, how's this going?" And I'm like, okay, remember to say good morning. Like it's one of those things.
Yes, right?
But I have to like remind myself, say good morning, because I'll immediately shoot off a response like, "Oh, and good morning." And so,
Yeah, I'm
those
going to answer their question.
I
So maybe
get
the game
I get
is,
laser focused on the
yeah, or
question.
maybe the game is I repeat back to them what they said.
Hmm.
Oh,
Hmm.
good morning to you. I'm
Hmm.
enjoying my coffee. And
Hmm.
how are
Hmm.
you? By
Hmm.
the way, did you get the bleh thing done?
Yes. Yes. So I'm learning. I've gotten much better. It actually is an improvement. But when the Dr. Kathleen Edelman book, so when they're talking about these temperament, so it's a temperament test is
It
what
is,
she calls it.
yes. Yeah.
And so it just allows you to communicate more effectively. And we started doing this with new hires in our office because
Ah,
it is one of those things where if I know I have a green and I'm frustrated because she's just not producing the results and I've asked her to do something 10 times,
mhm.
it's like I've got to find the one way where it's going to, I have to inspire her to
Fire.
work,
Yes,
not
ma'am.
demand her to work. And so
Yes,
there's different ways to get effectiveness out of your people. And so
absolutely.
that's how you do it. You work in their zone of here's how I would be more effective if you communicated with me. And so it really just helps everybody if you understand where they're coming from and what their values are.
Absolutely. Because what the beautiful work that I do is when we do the disc and we understand that, then
Mm-hmm.
it's like I'll say, now here's your team, right? Here's your whole team. And
Yeah.
then we do core values. And it may be that if your core value is integrity and you have a
Mm-hmm.
green that you can't figure out how to inspire and she keeps doing it wrong, then
Uh-huh.
that's a core value. It's not just communication. That's a core
Right.
value that's being hit there, which is
Mm-hmm.
why it makes you so angry.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
then you can take that information and say, all right, what is their core value? Because I didn't, something's good when you give it to someone and then they say, can I turn around and use this on my team? And you had never
Right.
even thought about using it that way. And
Right,
so
right.
my core values work has developed that way because it's been so effective and helpful. And
Hmm.
when we know who we are and how we communicate, that gives us two-thirds of the basic equation of how we actually succeed.
Yes.
And that just, it makes all the difference in the world. But I love that you're using it in the hiring process.
Yeah.
We
Oh, I
have,
think it's so important. And,
yeah.
I was actually talking to another friend of mine, and I guess they had used it, and they're a much, much bigger company. It was like a technology company or something. And engineers, a bunch of engineers. So you
Mhm.
have a lot of blues and
Yep. Yes. Yep. You have picked up on the language.
and so but they gave them blocks,
Mhm.
and the block would say, talk to me with respect, or
Yep.
talk to me with intention, or whatever it is. And so they
Yes.
would put those little blocks on their cubicle, so that
Yep.
if I'm not really familiar with Bob, but I go over to Bob's cubicle, it's going to change the way I ask him to do something, because his core value or his temperament is going to be different. And so the I said this, you heard that, means
Yeah.
I can say the exact same thing to 10 different people, and they're all going to take it a different way. And
Right.
so, it's all about how you communicate, and communicating to the person in a way that they will receive it the way you intend it.
Yes, yes. And we do the same thing. We have like little things that we put on for teachers or for cubicles that we say,
Yeah.
hi, my name is this and I'm a this. And we use not just the temperament, but we use an actual like designator for it. Like I'm an ICD and they call
Uh-huh.
that the leader. My
Oh, nice.
husband is a CS and that's
Okay.
called a precisionist, right? So
Okay.
it's just
I love
my son
that.
is also a high C.
Uh-huh.
But he's the mediator, right? So it's like it
Mm.
because it shows like it kind of gives you a name for the qualities. I
Hmm.
coached one woman who was a chancellor,
Oh,
and she was
wow.
like, "What on earth?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you need to look up what a chancellor actually is. This is a big deal. You can
Mm.
actually see the big stuff." But when we do that, what you're doing is you're giving the example of remembering that the communication responsibility falls on the communicator.
Hmm.
It is
Yes.
my responsibility as the one giving the information to make sure that you get what I intend.
Yeah,
And
that's
that,
really
therefore,
profound.
yeah, I need to
Hmm.
do it in a way that you understand. It
Right.
is the best way that you can care for your staff. It is
Hmm.
the best way you can get employee engagement. It will change everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, if I say it in the way that makes me feel comfortable, I could walk away and that did
Mhm.
not get received the way I wanted it to, and therefore it's not going to resonate.
Yep.
They're not going to be able to execute on what I want them to do, because it wasn't received in the way I intended. And so
Yep.
really just, crafting that's, the speech and the instructions, and, the ask around how they're going to receive it best is really critical.
Yeah. I mean, because if we do that, then we're being self-centered, selfish, we're being
Mm-hmm.
lazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there's not a person listening to this podcast who's lazy,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
And why be lazy in our communication?
Mm-hmm. It's true. Yeah. And it's self-centered. You're right. Because I mean, it's
It's about
about,
me.
it's about me, and what works for me, and
Yep.
how I can do things for myself to make it easier for me. And so
Yep.
that's not always the best way to go about it. So
Not
very
as a
cool.
leader.
Not as a leader. Not as a leader. So so what is deconstruction? And because you talk about deconstruction in your bio also, and I'm just curious to see how that becomes I guess just an influential factor when you're dealing with clients who
Yeah.
need to improve their communication style. Is that what deconstruction is?
It can be. In general, deconstruction is taking it apart, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. If it's an
Mm-hmm.
engine for a car, if it is my religious faith, if it is
Mm-hmm.
the way I see the way I've always seen what it means to be a leader in industry, any of it, it's just taking it apart. We watch Top Chef and I love
Yeah.
deconstructed salads or
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's pulling out the individual parts and kind of putting them back. It's never just pulling them apart and leaving them on the floor. My son
Mm-hmm.
used to do that. He'd pull apart a drone and leave it on the floor. And I'm like,
Mm.
I can't have all these little pieces everywhere.
Yes.
So it's the process of deconstruction, reconstruction, of pulling apart
Mm.
the pieces of whatever it is you're looking at, and then putting them back to get together in a way that either was original or makes
Mm-hmm.
sense in a new way. And when I talk about that with especially women leaders, we have so much in our conditioning. I call them our ABCs, our assumptions,
Hmm.
beliefs, and conditioning. We have
Okay.
so much conditioning to deconstruct that
Mm.
comes from, quite frankly, centuries of the way things have been done. And
Hmm.
recognizing that patriarchal systems does not just, it cannot only affect females.
Hmm.
It affects everyone. And
Hmm.
deconstructing the way everything that we've done from the industrial revolution on, and deconstructing the way we see what a leader is, deconstructing the way we interact with our communities, the way we
Mm.
do diversity inclusion, being willing to take in information, decide whether or not I want to take it as a whole or if I want to break it apart and say what is for me and what is not for me.
Hmm.
Because I don't have any impact when I am acting within the assumptions, beliefs, and conditioning that I have been handed or that I have accepted over the years because it was easy.
Hmm.
And if I don't develop, and if we don't develop clear understanding of who we are and who we're uniquely designed to be, and that includes DISC and core values and other things, then we will never, ever understand our true source of authority and we will never be able to communicate it.
I love that. I love that so much because you're so, so dead on with all of this because I think that's what visionaries do well is that they take a process and they say, okay, I'm going to deconstruct this entire process. And this part works for me. This part works for me. All these other things, they're antiquated and we're not doing those anymore. And, I've done that with my company in the security industry. So,
Mhm.
I always say I'm quite an anomaly because not only am I a female founder in the security industry, which is not very common,
Mhm.
but it's also I don't come from law enforcement and I don't come from military and I don't come from a large security agency. So like I come from outside the industry and people weren't sure what to do with that at first because I was
Mhm.
breaking up the whole system. I was
Good
like,
for
nope,
you.
I'm going to take this piece and we're not doing any of the other stuff. And they're like, but
Sure.
it's always been done that way. And I'm like, that's exactly why we're
Exactly
not doing
why.
it.
Yes.
And so, it is a challenge, but, it took a while for that acceptance to come through because when they see you doing something differently, when they see you like breaking a system apart, it's not received well many,
Right.
many, many times. And so you really have to show the value of it before you get the buy-in
Yeah. Well,
from everyone
remember,
else.
69% of the population and then another
Uh-huh.
13% are on the reserve scale. That
Yeah.
69%, those S's, they don't want you to change any processes.
No.
They're the back end of your change curve, right? It's
Hmm.
like the front end of your
Hmm.
change curve are D's and your I's. And then
Yeah.
if you get enough information to your C's and a few S's, you might get them like heading over the top, but it takes a
Yeah.
long time for those S's to all come on board.
Yes.
They're the ones
Yes.
that you have to really massage into change.
Uh-huh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it is a fascinating process and I think that you can come up with so much. I mean, like, even simple things like computers, like one of the reasons I'm a huge Apple fan is because Steve Jobs was a great visionary
Agreed.
and, he was great at deconstructing, he's like this part of a computer works. All this other stuff doesn't work and we're not doing it
Yeah.
that way. And so, he did that with so many things. He didn't necessarily invent everything,
Right.
but he found the better way. And
Yes.
so, he didn't invent digital music. He just found a better way to put it on an iPod, and so
Yes.
there's just so much that, he's not the godfather of all inventions, but he's the person who really, in my opinion, was the visionary and the one who found all the processes that didn't make sense and he removed them and took out the inconveniences. So,
Well, and if you want to flip that around too and talk, I'm an Apple fan as well. I noticed as
yeah.
you were putting together your computer, we have the same port that we need to use
Yeah.
for our USB stuff because
Hmm. Hmm.
half the time I can't even take my computer anywhere because
I
everybody has a
know.
USB or a HDMI to plug in. But
Exactly. Yes.
flipping that around, what not only did Steve Jobs do all of that, but Apple is a perfect example of speaking to all the different types, right? And
Yes.
speaking and communicating their values as a company and making
Hmm.
sure that it's a customer experience. So
Hmm.
their straightforward bottom line people get
Yep.
exactly what they want. It's
Yep.
straightforward bottom line from Apple.
Yep.
But S's get all the security that they need.
Yep.
C's get all the detail. They get everything. I's have the beautiful, fun experience. I mean,
Uh-huh.
you brought that up. They're just a really good example of living all of that out and communicating their message in a
Hmm.
way that touches on all of the different people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and Yeah, so everything, I'm a huge fan of different CEOs. I was talking to at that Female Founders 250 thing that I went to over the weekend. I was talking to one of the other ladies and I said, "Yeah, it's about." I said, "I got to go get a Lyft." And she's like, "Why Lyft and not Uber?" She's like, "Everybody takes Uber." And I'm like, "CEOs." I was like, "It's the CEO difference." And I said, "I'm a big fan of CEOs. I think Lyft has a better program." And it was like, "I just feel like they do it better." And I was like, "They
For
have a better
you.
CEO. They're more innovative. And I said, "So I'm loyal to efficiency.
Yeah.
I'm loyal to caring about their audience. I'm loyal to, a CEO who goes out to do the right thing, not just to make a whole
Mm,
bunch of money."
right.
So yeah, but yeah, so it's an interesting dynamic out there when you look at your values and
Yes.
how you are purchasing decisions. And so many people just blindly purchase. They just purchase because it's most convenient, the cheapest, the most available. But everything that I purchase has to align with my values, and whether that's taking a ride share or
Hmm.
a computer, and
Right.
so it's very, very important to me that the companies that I'm utilizing also align with my core values.
Well, and for those listening, y'all, she's if you haven't given her 5 stars already, you need to because she's literally making my points.
Uh-huh.
You're doing, and you're asking beautiful questions because and giving me great examples because when you talk about how you line up and why you do things, even if you hadn't identified a core value,
Hmm.
you're living in a way that honors them, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if anybody listening says, well, how do you do that? That's how you do it. That's
Right.
how you honor the things. And it may be that you find that there's a principle underneath that, or that's a principle and you've got something underneath it. But that's a great example.
Yeah. Well, and I think, we speak with our money, and women
Yep.
have, we are the economy. And so when you
Mhm.
think about how much decision-making power women have in purchasing, we are very powerful, and we can demand that companies start aligning with their core values in a way that makes sense for us.
Mhm.
So I think that that's also an important part to get across to people that, you know, you vote with your money. So.
Absolutely. Every time.
Hmm.
Every time.
So tell me a little bit more about these three ABCs that you talked about, because I want to dive into that. That's really
Oh,
interesting.
okay. So, I love acronyms and I love
Uh-huh.
examples. But when I started my deconstruction process for
Mm-hmm.
myself, and for
Mm-hmm.
me, I come from like I said, my parents were missionaries in Korea. So I come from an evangelical, Southern evangelical background.
Uh-huh.
And my husband is a pastor. I met him in seminary.
Uh-huh.
But as I age, I'm 57, and I lost my mother at age 50 and went into kind of a crucible, kind of really saying, what is it that
Mm.
and I'd already kind of started this process a little bit, but it's amazing how hard circumstances will put you in a place to make you really look at things. And I'm like, what do I stand for? And as I started doing some deconstruction in my faith space,
Mm-hmm.
deconstructing the external things, not the internal piece, I realized I had assumed so many things.
Mm.
And we do this, every single one of us do this. And then we assume that our beliefs are, let's look at these assumptions, and then we assume that our beliefs are things that we've always had and that we'll always have, and
Mm-hmm.
that they're not affected by anything. They're just me. And people will say, I believe in this, and that's my core value. No, friend, you don't. That is not.
Yes.
Let me define it for you.
Mm-hmm.
Beliefs are changeable. Assumptions are things that we have just come to, like, I hate to keep using the word assume. We just assume they're true, right?
Yes.
We beliefs are things that we have attached a true value to. And
Okay.
so beliefs are changeable.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So you might have believed before that another computer company was a good one for you to support. Now you
Mm-hmm.
believe that Apple is the one you support. That's a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
changed belief. You have now
Right.
changed the value of truth that you've placed on that. So beliefs are things, if anybody has changed a political party, if
Yeah.
anybody has changed a religion, that
Yeah.
is all belief that falls in the belief area. But
Hmm.
every single one of our beliefs, and especially our assumptions, are buoyed and undergirded. I love these big words. They are supported by all of our conditioning that
Yeah.
happens from the day, probably before we are born, but especially from
Yeah.
the day we are born.
Mm-hmm.
And, fish don't know they're swimming in water, right?
Right.
So there's no reason to blame yourself for your conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
We have awareness of what we have when we have it. Like I know
Mm-hmm.
what I know when I know it and not a minute before.
Right.
I describe ABCs as an iceberg, right? The assumptions are way above the water. It's what we see. And
Yeah.
people bump into those and we're like, hey, what you doing? It's
Yeah.
like, cut it
Yeah.
out. Beliefs kind of sit like at the waterline, above and below. Some of them
Uh,
people don't really see, we don't talk about because it might cause an argument, or they're things that we're just really strong about. Things are
mm-hmm.
just way out there. Or I attend church every Sunday, so people think I believe and assume I believe certain things.
Right.
But the conditioning below that is everything from the way your mother held you when you were a baby, whether or not she breastfed you, the community that you were in, the neighborhood you lived in, the school you went to, the studies that you
Mm-hmm.
did, the friends that you had, their parents, and the things that they said in the background when you were playing on the playground. All of that is conditioning. At
Yes.
some point in our life, we take over
Mm-hmm.
some of those things because our beliefs, like we start off with a little tiny iceberg
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
and we start with nothing and it just kind of builds and builds and builds. And as we decide certain beliefs that we're going to
Mm-hmm.
have, like when I was in college, one of the things for me belonging was I actually joined the college Republicans,
Yeah.
right? And it
Yeah.
was just like, that's who I am. And this
Right.
lines
Right.
up with all my conservative, this, that, and the other. And that's who I
Uh-huh.
am. And now I look
Uh-huh.
back and I'm like, what kind of damage did I do?
Uh-huh.
But it just depends because I was blindly following because
Mm.
I was allowing this sense of safety in the flotation device that was my conditioning to fuel a belief to let me move forward in that area. So the hard
Mm-hmm.
work, when you start looking at your core values, when you
Right.
start looking at your conditioning, and sorry, when you start doing some deconstruction of
Mm-hmm.
the things that you don't need anymore, whether or not you do, you have to be willing to confront your ABCs. You
Oh,
have to be willing to say, what do I believe about this situation that's making me assume certain things?
mm-hmm.
Where did that belief come from? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all part and parcel with the deconstruction process. But
Mm-hmm.
if we're not willing to do that work, Angela, we will
Mm-hmm.
never, ever change. We
Mm-hmm.
will never grow. You talk about women who break the glass ceiling. We won't break that glass ceiling because we're just going to bump up against it. And that's just going to be as high as we'll go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's some really hard work going beneath the waterline into the darkness because
Yeah.
there's things down there we don't even realize are there.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I mean, I have plenty of conditioning that it's even funny. I told my dad, I said, yeah, I thought this thing, and I don't even know why I did. It was just kind of was like in the background of my mind. And he looked at me and go, why would you think that? And my dad was a missionary and a preacher and stuff. So this was a
Yeah.
theological thing. And he said, why would you think that? And I'm like, well, in my mind, you said it.
Oh
Goes, I would
no.
never say that. And I'm like, but see, we
Yeah.
assume, it's like I had this conditioning that my dad was my spiritual authority. Therefore, I
Yes.
believed that anything that I considered to be from a spiritual authority was from my dad. And so that was an assumption
Mm.
that came from my dad. And then when I went to chop that piece off my iceberg, my dad was like, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
It's all a piece. When we talk about doing internal work, this is the part that gets scary for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it may mean that we have to change relationships. It may
Mm-hmm.
mean that we have to let certain things go, change a direction in our career. There's certain things about my past that and we may have to apologize for things.
Mm-hmm.
There
Sure.
is grief involved
Mm-hmm.
always because we're going to either grieve the things that happened to us or we're going to grieve the things that we did to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding, being willing, we're just tackling all the big things today,
I know.
but being willing to look, core values is the positive stuff. That's where
Right.
you find all the really good things. And it's
Right.
a great place to start because it helps you shine positive light on all of those ABCs. It helps you see into the murky waters, like down to the Titanic, right? It's like it
Mm-hmm.
helps you
Mm-hmm.
see. Whereas if you just start with deconstruction and you just start with conditioning, that can be a very dark place.
It
And so I
can.
like to
Yeah.
offer people the hope of shining light in dark places in order to help
Mm-hmm.
us find them and to realize it's not the only way I've ever been,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's not a two-dimensional thing. It's full 360 and
Yeah.
there's plenty that we have been and will do that is amazing. And the more we
Mm.
get rid of the stuff that we don't need, the farther we can go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that because I am a big believer in, once you have reached a certain age into adulthood, you no longer should be able to lean on, well, this is why, what happened in my childhood impacts what I do today. I'm like, no, 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 no. You've had time to work through that. Like, this
Or
is
you need
why
to work through it
we
now.
we evolve and we become better. We do personal growth.
Yeah.
Like, this is where you no longer at 40 years old or 50 years old or
Mhm.
60 years old get to say, well, it's because my dad always did this. No, no.
Mhm.
You have choices now, right? And we have
Last
the
I looked,
ability
your
to
driver's
reset.
license says you're an
Uh-huh.
adult, right?
Right. So,
And that's
yeah.
hard.
Absolutely, it's hard, but
Yeah.
you have to be able to face it, and you can't just lean on and so when I hear people excusing bad behavior because of oh,
Hmm.
well, she does this because of what her childhood was like, and I'm like, no, she doesn't do that at 40 because of what her childhood was like. She does that at 40 because she's never dealt with her childhood. That's
Yeah.
the difference.
Well, and
And
we've
so,
gotten in the
mhm.
habit or the rut, or it's a coping mechanism that we just
Yeah,
haven't challenged.
and
It's like
yeah,
an
and
unexamined thing.
we've convinced people that it's acceptable, our behavior is acceptable
Yeah,
because it's more convenient for them to accept it than for us to change it. And
absolutely.
so, the more people, when somebody goes and tries to convince you that their behavior is understandable because of what they've been through, and so they can get excused for bad behavior, that's not an excuse. Like, you've had time to figure this out. So yeah, so I'm
Okay.
again, no
And
empathy.
here's
I have no
well,
empathy.
I'll add the empathy in. Here's
Okay.
because my empathy is good for me.
Okay.
And relator is number one, and
Uh,
consistency is my number 34. Remember, so
okay.
but here's the deal: there's a difference too, and I had this conversation yesterday between awareness
Mm,
and doing something about it. We can be
yes.
aware of what's gone on in our childhood, but if we don't do anything about it, that's
Right.
knowledge without wisdom,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
it being aware of something is your invitation to
Mm-hmm.
fix it.
Mm-hmm.
It is an
Mm-hmm.
invitation from your younger self, if we want to stay
Mm-hmm.
in that genre. It is an
Sure.
invitation from your childhood to say, I need this fixed. Could you please fix this for me? And we'll
Mm-hmm.
work together to make it better. Right. And
Yeah.
so there are ways to do that and ways to look at it to remember that it, things do happen and things are real, but it's always an invitation when we get the awareness of it to actually work through it and figure something out.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I know we're running over time right now, but you have just been so fascinating to talk to, and I
Oh,
really, really
good.
enjoyed it. But I will just ask you one more question. And what is it that you wish more people knew?
That they are allowed to think for themselves.
Yes,
I
exactly.
do. I wish they knew that it was totally fine to think for yourself and to figure out who
Mm-hmm.
you are. And when you do that, you will have so much more power. You will
Yes.
have, I mean, we talk about being pretty powerful, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
you'll be so much more powerful. You will be so much more magnetic.
Yes.
People, like I said, when you're authentic like that and when you can be you, then people are drawn to you. And you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to defend your opinions. You don't have to defend your boundaries. It becomes much more natural. So
Absolutely.
please think for yourself.
I love that so much. Well, thank you so much. And how can people find you, Andrea? How can people find you on the web, on
On the
LinkedIn,
interwebs,
wherever?
yeah. I am the intentional optimist. You can find me on
The
my website, The Intentional Optimist. You can find me at LinkedIn and Instagram. I'm very active there. I
Yeah.
post a lot, and I will respond to all of your DMs.
Oh,
You
nice.
can,
Okay.
yeah, you can unless it's a spammy thing, don't do that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
you can email me at andrea@theintentionaloptimist.com. I do
Okay.
have a podcast myself called Stand Tall and Own It. And it's
Love it.
all about empowering us to do exactly that. All the quirks, all the strengths, all the weaknesses, figuring out what it is.
Yeah.
But right above my head on my website is a button, and
Uh-huh.
it's free core values exercise. It's a
Oh, I love it.
one page PDF downloadable. Do that and get started, right? Because
Yeah, yeah.
figure out who you are. And if you need more help than that, at the bottom of the page, that's where it says you can get my core values course, or I have some coaching. I'm taking on some coaching clients where we work through
Oh,
the course
nice.
with individual coaching sessions with that. And that's what I said after that first session. A lot of people leave a little discouraged because they're like, I thought
Mm,
I knew them. Because
yeah.
Angela, 100% of my clients start thinking they know their core values.
Yeah.
Guess how
Hmm.
many don't know their core values?
I would say probably at least half.
100%.
Wow.
No one has come in because
Uh-huh.
we just don't know how to look the steep.
Yeah.
We just don't know. And so it's a good thing, and it's beautiful, and it's always exciting to see people completely change the way they move and act in the world, and to just watch them. I'm all about let's flourish, and I'm just ready to flourish.
Absolutely.
So please reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. And you can also find Andrea Johnson on our prettypowerfulpodcast.com. So if you didn't have a pen and write it all down, you can always go to the website, and her links will be there. So we'll make sure that you can connect with her in some way. So thank you so much, Andrea. You have been such a delight to talk to, and I've really, really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, everybody have an amazing day, and we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining our guests on the Pretty Powerful Podcast. And we hope you've gained new insight and learned from exceptional women. Remember to subscribe or check out this and all episodes on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. Visit us next time, and until then, step into your own power.